You mentioned part of his job might be orchestrating the release of players. That issue has risen to the fore here with this upcoming Under 20 World Cup in Argentina. It begins May 20th, comes your way on Fox Sports. Yesterday, the U.S. announced a 21-player squad for that tournament. There are plenty of names of note going from back to front: Gabriel Slonina, Caleb Wiley, Justin Che. In the midfield, Jack McGlynn, Obed Vargas. Up front, Cade Cowell, Quinn Sullivan, Kevin Paredes, who will join after the group stage. But a lot of the focus has been on the players that will not be there, who were not released by their clubs, either in Europe or in MLS. Paxten Aaronson being the most notable, Eintracht Frankfurt opting not to release him. They still have the German Cup final coming up against Leipzig, plus they're fighting to get into Europe next season in the remaining rounds of the Bundesliga. And you also had some MLS clubs that chose not to release players like Brian Gutierrez, Jalen Neal. And so this has sparked a wider debate. The U.S. is not the only country dealing with this. I am crestfallen over some of the Brazilian players that won't be playing in this tournament. France, I read, they had 28 requests for players denied by various clubs. Remembering that Youth World Cups are not part of FIFA's official calendar, so clubs are not obligated to release players. So there is this larger debate as to their responsibility here, especially when it's your own country. What do you make of this whole issue?
Well, I've told you before, Mosse, that I don't get jacked up about youth development the way that others do. And it's not that I can't see the value or that I can't get excited about a young player and extrapolate it out. It doesn't interest me to see the unfinished product. Having said that, this comes down to relationships, right? And so maybe coming off of the Gucci talk, this is where communication and relationships are so important in terms of establishing what you have as expectations, both as a player playing at a club and then the club's expectations of you. And going to play for a national team, whether it's the full national team or a youth national team, especially in a Youth World Cup, that has to be dealt with early on. And, for example, I think I read, the great Jim Curtin talking about how he would never want to deprive a young player of not just the opportunity, but the honor of doing something like this. Now, Philadelphia can maybe afford to have that mindset because they're all about youth and it's all kind of part of the plan. And it's different, Mosse, when you're talking about a Ricardo Pepi versus another player. And so understanding what their ambition is and having an understanding that as a club, you are an asset. And then it gets into the business part that we've talked about. Does it benefit the club to have this player go? Because I don't think there's a club out there that is not going to release a player if they don't think that this is going to benefit that player. Either increasing the asset that they have, right? So the value increases because the player has a good Youth World Cup, in this case, an Under-20 World Cup, or it benefits because it fosters that relationship. It's almost, you get some leverage because you have agreed to do this and there's a benevolence to it that might come back and serve you going forward. And you may want to be known as a coach or a sporting director or as a club in general that not only is okay releasing it, but encourages and wants their players doing these types of things. But there's also the risk of injury. And there's also the risk of devaluing a player or not having any change at all. And so Ricardo Pepi not going to the Under-20 World Cup, I don't know, from a competitive standpoint, a U.S. standpoint, yeah, I would like to see him play there, but I don't know how it changes his value relative to the move that he's probably going to make this summer. And he's already involved in the national team. And if you're looking at, from a player perspective, using a Youth World Cup or a youth national team as a stepping stone to the ultimate goal, which is playing for the national team, he's already done that, as have others when it comes to it. But there's still plenty of talent here when it comes to the U20 roster, but there is also plenty of talent that's not going to be there.
Well, here's the Jim Curtin quote that's gotten a lot of attention. I have it right here.
Okay.
Sometimes we get in our own way and act like we're Europe or South America. We're not there yet. We're not Spain. We're not Germany. We're not Argentina. We haven't won a World Cup ever. Let's try to win every competition at the youth level and show we have great players, because we do. Think about the kids, too. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity that they may never get back again. To prevent them from playing in a U-20 World Cup, I'm sorry, I don't agree with it. Maybe I'm in the minority there, but that's what I believe in, and that's what our club believes. Any of the guys that Mike Varys, the coach, calls in, we will excitedly release them. Now, he said this a week ago. I do wonder, had Philadelphia advanced to the CCL final, and let's say they had tons of injuries in the midfield, they were shorthanded in that department, would he still have released Jack McGlynn and had him miss both legs against Lyon to play in the in the Under-20 World Cup? At that point, if I'm a Philadelphia Union fan, I'm wondering, wait a minute, Jim Curtin, I get that you want to be this good guy and benevolent, and you see the greater good, American soccer, et cetera. But you're paid by the Philadelphia Union to make decisions in the best interest of the Philadelphia Union. And how is that in our best interest to have one of our best players miss the most important games in our franchise's history? So you can kind of see both sides.
It's not in the best interest of the Philadelphia Union. The Philadelphia Union has no responsibility at all to improve or enhance the U.S. men's national team at any level. But I do think that when it comes to Jim Curtin, I think what he's laying out is a principle. And, Jim Curtin, as we've said many, many times, is just a wonderful human being. And he's a true believer in the things that he says. And so, yeah, Mosse, I think that he would release that player even if it's detrimental to the Philadelphia Union. But also, that gets into people that are paying Jim Curtin's salary, that are buying tickets to see this team. And Jim Curtin is doing things that are not in the best interest of this team playing well and delivering the entertainment value that you have promised. So all of that is to say is that I think what Jim Curtin said is wonderful. It is romantic. It might be, to your point, unrealistic when it comes to what the realities are on the field. But it's also, I think we talked about this a few pods ago about identity and what is an identity. See, now that is an identity of a club. You may not agree with it, and we may poke holes in it as we have done, but at least that is establishing an identity. This is what I believe, and this is how the club is going to act relative to a situation like this. And other clubs may do it differently, and they will have a different identity. And so in that sense, first off, I love the sentiment that Jim has there. And secondly, I love that he puts it out publicly because it forces him to live up to it. But I think it also shows the type of guy that he is and the type of coach that he is and why people have so much time for Jim Curtin. So that's great. And also, I think if you take a step back as a coach, your responsibility and your legacy is what these players become and how they improve. And if you honestly believe that that's the best course is sending a player, and by the way, Mosse, you might have a conversation with the player, and some of these players might have said, you know what, I don't, this is not something that I have a burning desire to do. And they might come to an agreement. All right, well, we're not going to release you, and we'll take the hit for that because if you come out and say that, it might not be right. Anyway, but when Jim Curtin is talking about his players right there, I think that garners a lot of attention, and I think it provides a loyalty between him and players. And don't think for a second that he is not sending that out as a signal to future players that could potentially be with the Philadelphia Union.
You like that clip? Well, my State of the Union podcast drops every week. Subscribe now on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. You like that clip? Well, my State of the Union podcast drops twice a week right here on my very own YouTube page. The only way to stay up to date is to hit that subscribe button down below. Size the day, and see you soon.